Best of luck. Enjoy yourself. Here we go. There's always a slight lag. But hello world. Hello everybody.
Hello everyone.
Can you hear us both? Can somebody confirm in the chat? Mike, do you want to sing a song so they can check your audio?
No one wants that.
I'm waiting for confirmation in the chat. Somebody, please be kind enough.
Yeah, there's always a bit of a lag anyway, so I'm sure it's already.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Good to go.
That makes a nice change. All right, there's still plenty of time for me to screw something up, but yeah. So I'm Brian Waters. For those of you that don't know, the founder of the QTube. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in. I see we've got like 21 people or so watching, and we've got plenty of people in the chat, so that's lovely. So if you are tuned in, say hello to us in the chat. That would be really nice, and then we can maybe look out for your piece of music if you've submitted it. So say hello in the chat. And so I'm joined by Mike Ladouceur, who's going to take care of business actually. Mike, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and kind of basically take over from here, and I'll just be monitoring the chat?
Sure thing. So yeah, I'm Mike Ladouceur. Just a can't hear me.
Okay. Can you hear Mike now, maybe?
Let's double check. Let me just double check on my preferences here on the audio. I should be giving signal through. Is that working okay?
I'm hearing you absolutely fine, so the problem must be at my end. Let me see.
Yeah, might just need to make sure that you're streaming Zoom out through kind of to OBS to it might be a separate audio device.
Okay, it's back on now.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what to do because I want to mute my microphone, but it seems that when I mute my microphone, for some reason it's killing everything. That's a bit annoying.
Well, hopefully they're not just hearing me through your speakers and into your microphone.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that has happened before, and then I found out later on when I've listened back. Okay, well, I mean, we should be fine. I don't quite understand why me killing the mic is killing everything, but I'll just try to stay quiet then, basically, as quiet as I can.
Cool. Well, let's. I guess I hope you guys can get my spiel. Just on my background, but if not, check out my website. All the information's there. Glad to be here anyway. So I'm gonna just kind of jump straight into it because ideally I just want to get through as many submissions as I can today. We had quite a lot of submissions. There was about 40.
Mike.
Yeah.
I think I figured out what's going on. I think that I think they're only hearing you through my speakers into my microphone, so I need to do something. Yeah, just bear with me. Sorry. Can you just say something?
Sing a song. You should be able to see on your OBS like a device coming through from Zoom if you've set it up that way.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've set up a Zoom window, but that's just the video and the audio on the MacBook at least. The audio and the video are dealt with separately on OBS, unfortunately.
If you've not got it set up already, we may have to just go forward with it this way, just because I think you might need to like download and install something if you're going to be sort of streaming from Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I've downloaded and installed something previously. Let me see.
Try your Zoom outputs and see if you can like send them to a device.
Yeah. Oh dear.
I know it's live.
I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry, Mike. Yeah, it's been a while since I've done a live stream. I apologise. Yeah, because I remember I had to install this thing called VB cable for some reason. Oh dear. Why?
Just proceed as we are for now, and then.
Okay, well, I'll just have to turn my speaker up, but I suspect that the result will be that you'll sound very echoey, and of course it'll mean that the music will sound very echoey as well, unfortunately. Let's try that.
Then we can see how the first one goes.
Yeah.
And let us know in the chat if it's unbearable. Because, yeah, I just want to make sure that that comes through. So, cool. In the meantime, Brian, if you're kind of messing around with it and you find a solution, just chime in. And,
yeah,
and let me know if you're going to swap anything over. Just don't want to hold up too much.
Yeah.
Cool. So I won't say much more and jump in because I just want to get through a bunch of these. So first of all, thank you for submitting these. It's always really nice and quite a daunting thing for people to share their work. So I really appreciate you putting yourself out there. Put that up. Yeah? Cool.
Yeah, I think I figured it out. It should be much better now.
Okay. So let us know if that is, if things seem a bit better or not. So also apologies for my location. I'm in the States right now. Had to come here, so I'm in quite a makeshift studio, but cool. Cool, great. Thank you guys for bearing with us on that. So I'm going to go through first with, I've got Claire Holdish. I've got your piece here. I also want to save a little bit of time at the end because I saw a bunch of the questions that you guys submitted. So we can talk through some of those too. I think that'll be great. So this is Claire's piece. Let's pull this up and let's just have a watch and a listen. Nice work, Claire. So we can give a virtual round of applause. Cool. I think so structurally, very nice job with this. I think the spotting is very clear throughout. So kind of, you're marking the points where you want the changes to be. That's all very clear. And I think very logical. I think that works very well for this. I think also what's working very well is the sort of two different themes between the two characters. So you've created a clear musical identity for both of them. What I think could make this a bit smoother overall is some of these changes are quite abrupt. And I think you could even smooth that out either with making some of the melodic lines a little bit smoother, where sometimes it will kind of play through and then you have like an abrupt cutoff in the middle of a phrase. And that can work within a piece. But I think if you do it too many times, it sort of makes the joke old. So then the joke doesn't land as much anymore. So some ways that you can do that are kind of like you can do it once initially, and you can have that sort of shock. But then if you make the harmonic transition a little bit smoother, so it can kind of go from like a logical progression or a more of a clear cadence, that can help kind of with those cutoff points. And so then I think connecting the two character themes, I think if you also work on making a bit of a smoother transition in there, which could be achieved either by the same kind of idea, like making it more melodically or harmonically cohesive between the two, or I think also with the instrumentation, if they're I don't want to suggest too much because I think it's nice that they have their own identity, but they feel a bit distant. Could also be that maybe they're in a slightly different key. So kind of when one sort of stops and then the next gets introduced, they feel like it's two pieces of music that are sort of music edited together a little bit. So I'm being a bit picky about it because I think, again, the structure of this, I think is very well done with the spotting. So I think these are more like you don't need to kind of rewrite or make this from scratch. It's more fixing this kind of in the smaller transitions and making those smoother. So that's very good. The other thing I would suggest on this is more on the programming. I think the mixing actually sounds pretty good. Like all the ideas are very clear and everything is balanced. So it's more on the programming of the instrument lines themselves. And so I think trying to add just a bit more life into each line, that's with your modulation and your expression mostly. And then mix-wise, you could probably create a little bit more depth. So I think if you create, I'm not sure how you have it routed, but if you have like one big group reverb that you're sending everything through, and you can make a bit more of a difference between like what's in the background and what's in the foreground of your piece, I think that will overall just fill the space a bit more. But once again, mix-wise, it's pretty balanced. So I think that's the most important thing first is, are your ideas coming through clearly? And then after that, kind of making sure that you're creating the sort of environment and the space that you want. So cool. Hope that's helpful. Thanks very much for sharing, Claire. It's very good. So let's jump ahead. By the way, I'm sort of just picking these out at random, just to kind of go through them. So there isn't really like a specific rhyme or reason to the way that I'm choosing these. Let's do next. I've got James Fowler. Let's pull yours up. And we've got Son of Saul. So this is from, sorry, let me get this in front so you guys can see it. I forget which film music competition this was from a few years ago, but I've seen this one with some students quite a bit at the college. So I know this clip pretty well.
11 Minuten. Wir müssen gehen weiter. 2 kilometry. Lasem. Musimy spotkać kogoś. Z Armii Krajowej. Dadzą nam broń. Będziemy walczyć z Sowieci. Sojusz pod Krakowem. Jeśli nie, pójdziemy na Pszczynę.
Cool. Very nice work. Again, I think the spotting on this is very good. You know, I think structurally it's very clear what your ideas are for this. And I think it's this is a pretty tough clip to score, to be honest, because it's got quite a lot that's being said, but it's also very subtle. And particularly kind of when we first see this boy come around the corner, this shot is such a long shot, or it takes a lot of time, this shot. So it's something that, you know, like we don't notice him quite at first. He sort of pops his head, pops back, and then comes out for real. So it's difficult to do, but I think you do well kind of with the different sections of this. The first section, I think you create a nice kind of atmosphere here, but I think what you might be able to do a bit more of is create more of like a sound world with some of the textures that are going on here. So I'll play just a little bit more of this. So the primary kind of bed of this is some tremolo strings mostly. And then I like that you've got a lot of other, a little more like solo instruments sort of coming in and out. So it's not like it sounds like a flute solo or something, but it sounds more just like little bits and pieces as part of a texture. but I think this texture could be directed a little bit more, kind of sculpted a little bit more. So you could also do some other things like with the strings where different bits maybe come in and out, like with the harmonics that you've got going on. So you create sort of like an arc over this section rather than one sort of texture from start to finish of that section. So I hope that makes sense. But I think you could create like more mini arcs through each of these sections that then kind of help us lead from one to the next. In this next section here, before the boy comes out, I think might be a bit busy for what's going on because there's a bit of talking going on and stuff like that. And really it's a build up kind of to that moment. Like it's all quite tense. I think the music is here saying quite a lot.
Są już pod Krakowem. Jeśli nie pójdziemy na Pszczynę.
So I think it almost makes this section a little bit melodramatic instead of supporting this sort of like moment of calm before the storm. So I think actually if you just have a little bit less going on melodically here, that might support it a bit better, just to sort of take a step back. I really like the approach when the boy does step in and you have the solo instrument here. So my only criticism here, I think, would be to like, this is a good moment for that melody to sort of come out. And I think the violin melody is a little bit more directed. The cello melodic fragments that are there, I think sometimes get a little bit in the way of it. So I think maybe wait for like moments where your violin is sort of ending the phrase, then have the sort of cello bits come up. So they sort of dovetail with each other. I think that will be a little bit more fluid throughout this section. And then the last bit here, just on the end, as he's sort of running away, this is quite a big dramatic moment. My only suggestion would be that at the moment, I think you're playing it a little bit more two-dimensional. So it's kind of like the music is playing the drama that we're seeing directly on screen. But another approach might be playing more from his point of view and trying to leave us with like, what do you think his final wish is? So this is the end of the film. It's a very dramatic film. It's a Holocaust film. And so it's sort of like, what do you think the final wish, and why when he sees this boy and smiles and sort of sees that, you know, he's going to get out and he's going to get away. Like, what do you think that final wish is in contrast to everything that happens? And when we hear the gunshots and stuff. So I think that might be, you could play more of like a larger arc over this sequence rather than thinking of like, here is more of like an action moment and then a different section to it at the end. But very good job. I think that came out very nice. So hope that helps as well. Cool. So let's jump next on to, I've got Jeff Bird. Pull yours up.
Getting a quote for travel and
Oh, we've got YouTube ads.
There's something special about the cinema, a place where we can escape from the realities of the world and lose ourselves in the stories on the screen. It's a place of magic and wonder where we can be transported to faraway lands, witness incredible feats, and experience the full range of human emotion Cinema has the power to move us, to make us feel something deep and true. It can inspire us to be better, to see the world in a different light, and to believe in the power of the human spirit. Whether you're a fan of action, romance, comedy, or drama, there's something for everyone in a good film. And the best part is that you can share it with others, laughing and crying together as the story unfolds before you. So next time you're feeling down or just need a break, remember that there's always a place for you at the cinema where you can find joy, connection, and a little bit of magic.
Cool. Very nice work, Jeff. Also love some QTube shout outs with these clips. Cool. Yeah, very good. I think first off with your mix and programming sound really good. It sounds very balanced. Everything's really clear and there's a consistency throughout. So I think it sounds very smooth. So very well done. Good work with using the tools. I think you create a very nice, because this one is kind of like the structure of this is more like a trailer, this clip. And I think you create nice sort of arcs and moments throughout this. So there's only like small things in here that I can say. I'm going to jump back. There's kind of one, like I think what you do really well here is you follow the voiceover and kind of create those different sections out of what the voiceover is telling us. There's one moment in here, I'm just gonna watch it again, because I was wondering if it was off by like a frame or two.
Emotion. Cinema has the power to move us.
No, I mean, I think this is pretty good. I feel like that the drums sort of come in. This is being real picky, but it's sort of like a few frames late. Could be even that in your session, it is like dead on the cut, but then maybe the samples themselves are speaking a little bit late. So just double check that, because either make the change like right on the cut or away from it. Otherwise it will look like it's sort of out of sync. So we'll just double check that one, but structurally, musically, that all works well.
Cinema has the power to move us, to make us feel something deep.
So I really like the use of the voice through this one. Only thing I'll say about it is at the end, I might pull back and save it kind of for the very end, because I think it starts to get a little bit in the way of the voiceover.
Of magic. Connection and a little bit of magic.
So I might wait kind of until this phrase here after the voiceover is finished to bring that back in. And I think that will also then kind of give you a little more mileage, because from when the voiceover or the singing, when the voice is in here, it's kind of then that same texture all the way to the end. So it sort of creates like one musical section. But if you delay that entry, it will now give a little bit of variety here and work a little bit better around the voiceover. But otherwise, I think very beautiful piece. I think really well done, very nicely put together. So well done. Give you and James virtual round of applause. I forgot to after James speaks, but very nice. Yeah.
Somebody's asking in the chat, just quickly, we can do this before the next one. Does your course include any subtitles in Spanish?
Not yet, but great question. Because I'm currently working on translating the course into Spanish. So Spanish is the first language that I want to translate it into, just because I think it will give the most sort of access, especially to people in South America. So coming soon. I hope to have the entire thing just fully out in Spanish, kind of dubbed over, and I'm using a couple clever AI tools to help do that. But yeah, so hopefully soon. Doesn't at the moment, but I want to do it. I want to do it right, where I also have some native Spanish speaker students of mine who can proofread everything so that all of the musical terminology and everything is properly translated, rather than just like, a Google Translates horrendous kind of mashup. So, but yeah, thank you for that question. Spanish is the first one, and then perhaps Portuguese might be next. But I hope to kind of translate into a few different languages once I get that process down. Cool, very nicely done. Next up, I'm going to jump to Victoria Vernick.
Recently,
Yeah. Oh, more YouTube ads. Cool, very nicely done. I think the melody in this is beautiful, and musically this works really well. My only real comments on it are on the programming. So I think the mix is pretty clear, like all the elements are coming through very well. But I think particularly in the strings in this, we can hear kind of like the on and off of the strings. So, which is tough because strings are the hardest to program, full stop. It's also difficult depending on the libraries that you're using. So some are better at this than others. Why don't I'm just going to see how quickly I can do this. Let's see if I can just open up a logic session and show some quick kind of tricks for this that can help. And to do this, I'll use like a BBC Discover from Spitfire, because that is free. So everyone has access to this. So there we go, violins long. And hopefully, let me know, Brian, is that coming across on Zoom? Cool. So I'll just draw that in quick. So if I just look into this, I'm not going to worry about quantizing anything, but even with this, I've got the same thing where I can hear the individual like note on and off, or at least the attack. I can hear the individual note attack for each of these. So sometimes there's only so much you can do. So there isn't like a silver bullet to sort of solve this, but it's going to be a combination of using a few different parameters. So if I use, first of all, modulation. Modulation is going to help me kind of try to smooth these over and give a little bit more of a phrase to this. So, and for me, I mostly draw all of my automation in. I'm just better at it than I am kind of playing it into the mod wheel. And so I'll usually play it in with the mod wheel and expression, but then I'll go back and I'll like redraw and smooth it out. It's also that I go through every single line and will listen and make sure that it's the phrasing that I want. It is a tedious process, but I find then when you stack it all up, that's what makes the difference between a really nice sounding demo and one that sounds a bit bland. So kind of I'll end up having to do that anyway. So I still have a bit of that. I'm then going to add expression. And just in case you're wondering what the difference between those are. So this is the same for most Spitfire libraries, no matter what kind of level they're at. But modulation is often adjusting the, it's kind of the difference between which sample is triggered. So they may have recorded like a forte sample and a piano sample for the same note, and it might be crossfading between the two of those. So the main difference that modulation will give you is a difference in timbre, because obviously a note played at piano will sound different and will have a different color than a note played at forte. Then expression is a volume knob. So it is a volume knob usually before kind of it goes through some processing within the plugin itself. But that will then adjust purely the kind of volume of that before the final output, which is MIDI volume, CC7. So usually I can sort of draw in both of these together, and those can give me more of a phrase. So if I make this a bit more extreme, we can kind of drop this off at the top and tail. I'm getting some video in the background, Brian. I don't know if you got that. Oh, okay. So now we can hear a bit more of a kind of difference here. So I still want to get rid of that note attack. So one little trick that I could do is I can, to varying degrees of success, sometimes I can give a little bit of a dip in this kind of expression right at the sort of note on. And especially once I apply a little bit of reverb to this, it can sort of hide that. So it's like I'm dropping the volume and cutting out that attack on the note. I'll do this with a couple just so we can sort of hear that. And then I'll apply a little bit of reverb just within the plugin itself for now, and hopefully that will kind of help. If I do this too much, we'll hear it dropping out, but this should help make the whole thing sound a little bit more legato. And this way is a little bit extreme, so you can hear that I've sort of done the opposite of what I want to achieve. I want to sort of smooth those over. But then usually that reverb tail can kind of help smooth this over a little bit in the plugin. So this is just a little trick that might help with some of those sort of note attacks. So now that I added a little bit of reverb, it sort of helps cover up for that drop in volume and makes the whole thing a little bit more legato. So cool, very nice work with that. I'll keep the Logic session open just in case we want to use that again. But yeah, very nice. Virtual round of applause. So next up, I will jump on to, I've got Steve White. And I'm sort of just picking these sort of randomly, just going through, making sure that I get sort of around the submission form of it.
There's something special about the cinema, a place where we can escape from the realities of the world and lose ourselves in the stories on the screen. It's a place of magic and wonder, where we can be transported to faraway lands, witness incredible feats, and experience the full range of human emotion. Cinema has the power to move us, to make us feel something deep and true. It can inspire us to be better, to see the world in a different light, and to believe in the power of the human spirit. Whether you're a fan of action, romance, comedy, or drama, there's something for everyone in a good film. And the best part is that you can share it with others, laughing and crying together as the story unfolds before you. So next time you're feeling down or just need a break, remember that there's always a place for you at the cinema where you can find joy, connection, and a little bit of magic.
Cool. Very nice job, Steve. Round of applause. Cool. So I think very well spotted as well on this. I think there's also one kind of bit in here that might be a couple frames early. Just I think on this sort of
Fan of action, romance. Whether you're a fan of action.
that's about a second ahead of that cut. Just that if it's close enough, I think it's worth sort of moving it to the cut. So again, sorry to be picky about these things, but those are things that people will notice. So you just want to make sure that like little technical things like that you've got are like 100% perfect. Cool. I think the programming on this one, I think could use a little bit more attention. But just it's again kind of similar comments to what I was just saying about like programming the strings. Those are the things that stick out the most in this. And some other tricks that I've done before when I've had like, you know, less than ideal samples on something, especially if I've got like a more, I don't know, exotic instrument, or if I have to try and program like a solo string instrument is one of the hardest things to make it sound very realistic, is sometimes just layering up a couple different ones, and you could even like EQ them a little bit differently. And so say if instead of one first violin section, I duplicate that a couple times, I EQ them slightly differently, and then, or I make one say like soltasto or muted or something, and I drop the volume on them all to make them essentially equal the original volume of one of them. I can also then draw in that programming individually for each of them. So it has slightly different modulation and expression and even velocities for some of those. I'm then sort of creating like a section out of all of those. And so I'll do that all the time with like ensemble string patches mixed with section string patches using something like Spitfire chamber strings, something like a smaller ensemble, and solos. So I will kind of mix the three, and that usually helps me get kind of like the best of all worlds out of that. I think actually not for a shameless plug, but in the in my course, there's an example that I sort of walk through with just that and showing kind of how I layer them a little bit like in front of one another with reverb and at different moments when you can kind of make something sound more like a small section or more like a big ensemble. So I'd say the programming here, mostly in the strings, I think could be improved a little bit. Musically, I think it's beautiful. There's also a really nice moment kind of around here, around the 1 minute mark, harmonically. This is just worth another listen. It's really nice.
Romance, comedy, or drama. There's something for everyone in a good film. And the best part is that you can share it with others, laughing and crying together as the story unfolds before you. So next time you're feeling down.
So really nice transition through all that. Harmonically beautiful. It's a really nice chord progression and really helps build into that. So that's a type of thing too that just kind of helps stick out, like makes it a little bit more unique, because the rest of it is very nice, more diatonic harmony. And so then when you add in something that's a little bit different out of there, that's a little bit more like kind of pop harmony, it helps the whole thing just kind of liven up and stand out a little bit. So very nice work with that. Yeah, I think last comment on it would be the mix. I think just a bit more depth. If you could create a bit more depth, primarily probably with reverb. Everything sort of sits right up front in the mix. So I think if you can send put your brass a bit further behind your strings, spread them out a little bit more, kind of fill the whole sort of stereo image of the mix. I think that would help this a little bit. But beautiful music, very nicely done, well spotted. So congrats on that. Cool. Let's go with apologies if I'm going to butcher this, your name. Okay, Ingversion. And we've got a Spotify link for this. Cool. And your Spotify link just goes to your, oh, here we are, to the song. very nice job. Virtual round of applause. So I think with this, I like the structure of it. I like kind of how it builds towards the end. And I think the, climactic bit here sort of towards the end is pretty satisfying. You've kind of given us all the bits and pieces building up to it for them to come together. So nice job with that. I'd say one of the biggest sort of drawbacks at the moment is the programming. I think particularly I'm going to kind of show a little trick with short strings. We looked at some legatos, and so I want to give you another little tip for staccato stuff. So let's pull this up and just do this. So if I I'm just going to draw these in so that they're consistent from the beginning. I'm getting my shortcuts confused between Logic and Cubase. So if I leave these as they are, and I've got every note is just repeating, I'm going to get a pretty bad round robin in this, where we're going to hear the same note triggering over and over again. So it's a sort of machine gun effect where it's just the same exact sample triggered over and over again. So the first thing that I would do with this is randomize the velocity a bit. There's quick functions to do this. Apologies, Cubase is my main DAW, so I'm a little out of practice with some of like the quicker functions and things like that. But if I just sort of pick and pull these a bit randomly, the main purpose of this is that so now I'm sort of telling it to trigger these slightly different each time. So, and then depends on kind of how far away these are from one another. I just want some slight differences between them. So we still hear kind of this machine gun effect, but it's a little bit better. It's a little improved just from that. Another way to sort of trick the way that it triggers the samples is I call this like feathering this modulation and expression. So I'm sort of drawing little bits and pieces up. So now it's going to randomly trigger each of these at different points in the modulation and expression. So with just modulation alone, we can hear now there's a little bit of a difference between the notes. If I do this with expression as well, so you can start to hear there's a little bit more like sort of differences in kind of accents and things like that. One final thing I can do to this, and again, I'm intentionally doing this with free plugins just to sort of see if you can work with, like everybody has access to that as long as you have a DAW. You can also randomize the note length because sometimes the plugin will trigger something slightly differently if it has a different length to it. So it depends on kind of how they're programmed, but sometimes this helps. So I actually have a hot function in Cubase, a quick shortcut that will do just this. It will randomize the note length within sort of plus or minus 10 samples or ticks or something. So now you can hear like little notes will pop out a little bit more than others. And then again, if I could do this a little bit more extreme between this, but then if it gets to a point that I'm actually creating like noticeable accents, then I don't want to go that far. So what I could also do is sort of do what I mentioned before, like double this up in layers, and then I could sort of program them differently and draw this in individually per line. and that will create more of a sort of section sound. So that's one of the main things that sort of jumped out programming wise with this. I think the other thing is in the arrangement. I think there's moments of this, particularly more in the front half of the piece, that you could fill the space a little bit more. So filling this out with just a little bit more like variety in the instrumentation. I think, you know, it kind of changing up where the melody sits a little bit more often and changing the color around. I think that can kind of help this a bit too. But overall, nice piece. And, you know, good on you for putting your stuff out there. So well done. Cool. Gonna jump on to, gonna pick one more up here, and then let's see where we're at after this one. Because I've also seen a whole bunch of the questions that you guys submitted, and I would love to answer some of those, because there's some that are a little bit more like kind of career questions and stuff like that. I think it'd be great to get into some of that advice. So I'm gonna do, next up is Anthony Verano. Cool. Very nice work. Nice job with that one. I think really well produced. You know, it sounds really good, and you know, creates a very clear and kind of immediate mood with this. I like it's like a little bit kind of lo-fi, but it's also very full. So it's more, I'm referring to lo-fi more in kind of like the beat itself, rather than the production, because the production sounds very clear and modern. Very cool. You know, I think this also works as a sort of trailer overview. The only sort of comment I might give on that is that it feels a little bit more like a music placement at the moment, which can work fine if that's what you're going for. I think it suits the mood totally. But if you wanted to do something that is a little more like to create kind of an arc over this, I think you have a little bit more room to sort of like create your own story of, you know, sort of what all these visuals are here to represent. So at the moment, I think the mood is cool, you know, and that's sort of what I walk away with from this, is that like this whole thing is really cool. And, you know, whatever Andrew Huang is making here is, you know, just like the way all these shots are really slick and everything like that. So it looks really good for that. And I think this would be great for a reel for like advertising and that sort of thing. So if that's the intention, then nailed it. So only saying if you wanted to do something that is a little bit more kind of like scoring to picture, then I think you could create a little bit more of an arc overall that sort of moves and is a little more dynamic. But yeah, very good and sounds great. Very nice production on that. Cool. That was a quick one. So let me do another one here. And cool. And sort of just drawing out of a hat here. Let's do this one. Again, let me butcher your name. Yaroslav Nizev. very nice. Virtual round of applause. Very nice piece. Yeah, it's quite big, quite bombastic. There's quite a lot of things in there. I think it's very well written and orchestrated. It's a very nice job on that. You know, it's very, I think the idiom that you're going for, you nailed it. It is there's quite a lot going on. So compositionally, one thing that I think you could do is maybe present some of these themes a little bit more clearly, or give them a little bit more time on their own. Because I feel like it's a little bit sporadic. So it sort of jumps from one idea to the next and doesn't really give us a chance to kind of enjoy it or to feel what that theme is. And then, you know, to sort of follow up on it later or see the evolution of it. So that would be one thing that I kind of wanted a bit more of. Other thing I'd say is the mix itself is a bit muddy. So I think it's very mid-range heavy. One thing, I think that and a combination of the whole thing is quite distant. It sounds like there's quite a lot of reverb here. So it might be sort of two problems with one cause. I think that for the reverb, if you're using sort of one big group reverb that's sort of like your hall that you're placing everything in, I would cut out a lot of the low end from all of your higher end instruments. So like if you have, you know, your violas, your violins and stuff like that, I would cut out with the EQ, cut out the low end below the lowest note that they're going to play. Because for instance, if I have a bunch of like staccato violins and it's playing, you know, super big, I'm building up all of this like low frequency information that kind of just amplifies and extrapolates on itself even with the samples. So if you cut out that low end information, you're not actually changing the timbre of the sound that you're putting out, but you're then reducing all that low end that you're sending to reverb. So that's kind of what it sounds like here, is that there's just a lot of low information in the reverb, and then that's building up, and that's what's making it really muddy. So kind of save that for your actual low-end instruments, like your double bass, your tuba, stuff like that. Those can then be quite big when they go through the reverb. But if you cut out the low end from all of your higher instruments, flutes, violins, all that stuff, I think you'll find that it starts to clean that up quite a lot and can clean up the mix. So I think that's probably my main suggestion for that. And then, yeah, I think I would just love to be able to hear a little bit more of those themes, let those come through a little bit more clearly, and just give them a little bit more time and space to hear more of the variations and things that you're making on them. But very nice job, very well written. Yeah, and I think, you know, it suits the photo here. You know, it does, it is quite epic and, you know, kind of covers that. So very well done. Cool. We've got about 20 minutes or so kind of planned for just some Q&A. So I'd love to, I've got some questions here that are already sort of from your forms that I can jump in on. But also, if you've got any that you want to throw into the chat, feel free to do that. I'll stop the share here and then.
Yeah.
That means,
yeah, there was one in the chat actually. Can I interject with that one?
yeah, go ahead.
So somebody was asking, somebody's asking, how can I submit a song for review? I'm afraid you've missed the boat this time, but we'll probably do more of these in the future. So yeah, sorry that you've
yeah, just on that, I mean, Brian and I were talking just before we started, like I enjoy this. I think it's a nice format, you know, so I think we can definitely do more of these in the future.
Yeah.
You know, and we were kind of blown away by how many submissions there were. You know, I'm glad there was even a handful, but we had 40 in a pretty short amount of time. So clearly it's something you guys are eager for too. So I'm happy to do more of these.
Yeah, sure. Great. So one of the questions in the chat today was, could you, Mike, tell us one thing that you would love to have been told about the film music industry? Good question.
Yes. So I'll try to keep it brief, but I'll tell you a couple things. One is I think it's good to know that filmmaking is chaos at every level, at every stage. So, when you're working on like student projects and you're like, half these people don't know what they're doing and, it's all crazy. Nobody understands the timeline. It is exactly like that all the way to the top Hollywood productions. So those problems will remain. It's just something that you're going to have to deal with because I had thought like, oh, at some point, everything's going to be organized because everyone will have money to make it and doesn't change a thing. It's still like last minute. The director decides after you've already recorded all the music and dubbed it and it's had screenings and all that stuff. They're like, oh, we recut this reel. And so it needs to be redone and re-recorded. Um, it happens on like top Hollywood productions. Um, I think a more practical bit of advice, or something that I kind of wish I knew. Think about kind of the best way to put this. Um, Something that maybe I've learned is really that, you know, you will always have to be your number one champion. I think this is more like general career advice. Nobody's looking out for your career other than you. So you have to put yourself out there. You have to be the one to go meet people, build kind of your own network. And, it's something that you have to like constantly curate. That doesn't mean randomly reaching out to people or like, I've seen a bunch of advice out there where maybe 15 years ago this was a good piece of advice because nobody was doing it, but like randomly emailing, like cold emailing people from IMDb Pro, things like that. I've tried it. I've had friends that have like really tried it, sent like thousands of emails and maybe gotten one reply. A lot of that stuff just doesn't pan out. I think building more of like a grassroots network around you is the right approach. I think, kind of build within your small community and find a good group of people that you like making stuff with. Um, that was something that like I always appreciated from the beginning. But then I think when I started working on like bigger projects and working as part of a big music team, it felt like, oh, that will go away because then you're working with studios. But then it comes back because the people who are actually going to give you that gig and bring you on board to do that first sort of significant project that's with a studio is going to be somebody out of your direct network that is like a friend who has gone to bat for you to say you need to be involved in the project. So I think building, your network in a grassroots way is like always the way to go about it. Build up people around you. Also help other people, help people who know less than you, seek help from people who know more than you. It's always a fluid thing. I have a mentor as well. I have people who help me who are much further along in their career, and I'm very lucky for that kind of guidance and advice. So that doesn't stop at some point. Um, so hope that's useful. I've got another one that I saw here that was one of the ones that sort of jumped out to me from the form submission was about, can't find the exact one here, but it was something kind of about like show reels and kind of like having a portfolio of work and that sort of stuff. Let me see if I can just find something a little bit more specific. Here we go. Yeah. Would you recommend having a public portfolio of your work on social media? I think yes. I think it goes back to what I was just saying about like putting yourself out there and building your network. I think a lot of people are fearful that they don't feel like what they're putting out there is really high quality yet, and so it's like, well, when I'm ready, I'm gonna put a bunch of stuff up. And honestly, it's kind of like, well, I'll start going to the gym when I lose a bit more weight. It's like, how do you think you're gonna, lose weight until you go to the gym. So I think just start putting stuff out there. The reality is that most people don't finish things. They start a bunch of ideas, they don't actually finish stuff, and they never put it out. So there's no way for people to know what they're doing or what they're capable of. So I think it is worth having, your portfolio up, and always think of it as something that is evolving. It will evolve throughout your whole career. So say you do your first, say you get a kind of BBC drama, or you're doing kind of like a science documentary for BBC. That is a big gig. That's a big job to kind of you'd be getting in with a proper studio. It would be a real recognizable credit, especially if you're the only composer involved. But then, if your career progresses to the stratosphere and you're doing like giant, blockbusters and stuff like that, do you think that like those studios really care about that science documentary you did for BBC at some point? No, it doesn't. It becomes kind of irrelevant. So I think don't be afraid to put your stuff out there. I think it's great to put your work on display, and also seek ways of getting feedback, just like this, what we're doing here, getting some feedback, but also from some of your peers, not to shamelessly plug again, but I have a Discord community that I'm really genuinely proud of all the people in there for how supportive they are of each other. And there's kind of an open forum where people can just post up their work and get feedback. If you're interested in that, you can find it on my website. I've got a link to that up there. So you can just join the Discord. It's free, it's open. But there's plenty of those. Mine isn't the only one. Like Thomas Goss has his orchestration group online. That's a fantastic resource. There's people that do things like that are, better than what I would curate. So I would rather point people to the more established ones that are already there. But put your stuff out there, finish it, share it with people. I think that's great. Here is another one that jumped out at me. At what level do you send your tracks from each instrument to the mix? What process do you give them without losing dynamics? Thank you so much. This is from Cesar Diaz. So for the mix, I think of generally, this is a great question because it also brings up kind of gain staging when we're looking at this in a couple different ways. So generally my output mix is somewhere around -5 dB. And my template is kind of just set up as such, and I'm sort of used to it. I don't touch the volume knob on my audio interface much, because where that's set is what I'm used to listening to it at. So I can kind of tell where everything goes. In general, first with the gain staging, I start with MIDI volume. MIDI volume is the output of the actual instrument plugin itself. So the Spitfire strings that I was playing earlier, the actual volume knob that's at the top right of those plugins is your CC7 volume. That doesn't affect timbre whatsoever. It doesn't affect anything else. The level of reverb from the plugin, none of that. It is purely volume output. So I treat that as my first fader. And I'll listen through each individual line with the mix, and I'll go section by section. So first I'll get my first violin part sounding really good. And if I'm mixing that between ensemble, section, and solo patches all together, I'm going to be balancing those against one another with MIDI volume. Then I sort of get my general level for all those, and I'll combine it with my other strings and check the MIDI volume between all those. And generally I want a pretty healthy level, because I'd rather have that kind of at a good level up front where I can take it away, rather than having to try to gain volume later with a limiter or compressor or something, because then I'm distorting the sound to achieve just more volume output. And I think most people with your samples, if you feel like the samples are quite quiet and you have to kind of do something to really push them, you've maxed out the velocity and it's still very quiet, it's probably MIDI volume. Most people just don't use it very much. And so you could probably have a much higher ceiling to push them. So then that will go to my faders. If wherever that is sort of falling, I then usually use my volume faders in the mixer more for reverb. So like I will send to a reverb channel and then I'll reduce the amount of fader volume in order to create a sense of distance. So like the more send I give to the reverb and the less volume fader I give it, the further back it's going to sound. So, and then the inverse, if I have only a little bit of reverb that I'm sending it to, and I have more volume fader, it's going to sound up close in the front. So I will then kind of use that to sort of balance. And then this will go kind of be reduced down to group stems all the way until I have like full section group stems. At that point, if I identify a problem where it's like my strings are particularly quiet, I'll look back across the gain staging to see, where is it that I sort of went wrong, to have them be so much quieter than the other sections, and I'll kind of remix them. So I don't really think like, okay, I'm going to export this stem at a particular volume, and then everything is at this volume. That's what I'm going to start with my mix at, because everything is kind of working. Like if I'm working from a DAW with a demo and with samples, that's my sort of starting point. So that's kind of pre-mixed. And then if I'm adding in either like solo live instruments that were recorded or mixing like more of a bigger live session, then from that, I might approach it a little bit differently, just depending on what I receive back from the studio. I don't tend to mix like big sessions. If I'm recording in a studio, then like if I've got the budget for that, then I'll have the budget carved out for a mixing engineer, just because they'll do a much better job than I will. But I'm often mixing more like solo instruments or like small scale recording. And so it kind of becomes part of that like mix with the demo. So I hope that kind of helps answer the question. The answer is really more about gain staging than about like a particular level. But I hope that's helpful. Another one here. So when entering competitions that do not provide a brief or any type of spotting sheet for guidance, is there a method to make your submission stand out from the crowd? Great question. Because I think this also applies in general, like, if you're pitching on anything, if you're pitching for a project. So I'll quote Lauren Balfe on this, because there was something that when I used to work for him, I remember there was something that Lauren said that really stuck out to me once, which is, Lauren is undoubtedly very successful. He's done very well, and he's really good. He really understands like the business approach to being a composer. So one thing that he said was, we were working on a project, and he's like, the director's telling me one thing, the studio's telling me something completely different. And he's like, so what I have to deliver is like, you have to listen to everybody. You have to give them exactly what everybody asked for, and also something that's a bit of a curveball that's completely unexpected. And that's what's going to help you sort of stand out and help them latch on to that as like, that's a brilliant idea. Lauren got this from Hans. Hans is the absolute master of this. Every score that Hans does, there's some sort of hook to it. Like Interstellar was using organ. Inception was like the huge, big, like low brass stuff, and all of like the slowed down kind of Edith Piaf song. So there was like a hook that made it cohesive with the narrative. So I think if you've just got some competition that you're pitching to, if you can use like maybe an interesting instrument or an interesting sound, something like that can kind of help you stand out, that can help. Or like with, was it Steve's piece that had just like really interesting bit of harmony that sort of stood out? Something like that can really help. So yeah. Cool. Brian, how are we doing on your end?
Right, Mike. Yeah, all good. Yeah, there's some chat going on. You know, there's no real questions coming in on the chat, but everyone's appreciative of the session. Obviously, people want it to be longer, as they always do. Yeah, no, a lot of appreciation out there for your comments and feedback and everything and the tips. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, well, thank you guys very much. Yeah, I mean, why don't we just aim to do another sometime soon? I think that would be great. And here, sorry if I think my AirPods just died. So just double checking you can hear me okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, let's do another one. You know, we can make these, I don't know, quarterly or whatever. I think, you know, depending on your schedule and my schedule, really, we'll do it on a reasonably ad hoc basis. So, I mean, I definitely, you know, would encourage people to subscribe and hit the notification bell and all of that kind of stuff so that you don't miss the opportunity. But yeah, check out Mike's course. I mean, we've got a fantastic discount going on. Mike, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, just running at the moment. I've got a back to school sale going on. So I've usually have run it just for about a week. This one I wanted to give it a little bit more time. So we're running it right to the end of the month. It's a huge discount. So it's normally $400 US. It's down to $150 at the moment. So this is a great time to buy. And yeah, there's a lot of the things like that I covered today. Some of the tips kind of in the DAW, I get really in depth with these, especially on programming, mixing, and I also talk about just the whole process of scoring a film from start to finish. So if you check it out, you can explore kind of the units that are on the Teachable site and sort of get an overview of what's there. There's also a few videos that are available as a free preview, just so you can kind of get like a taste of the kind of content that's in there.
Yeah.
As ever, you know, feel free to reach out to me directly if you have questions about it. You know, if you're kind of on the fence, you want to know a little bit more, I'm really approachable. Probably one of the best ways to get in touch is actually through my Discord. So jump on my website, you can join that. As I said, it's a great community there. And then you can kind of direct message me through the Discord. Really easy way for me to kind of communicate, much easier than email. I have different email accounts, so Discord's a little bit easier.
Cool. I mean, it's probably worth mentioning that I think you do sort of regular interactive sessions with the students, right? And is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of changing the model a little bit on my end. So just because I've been totally transparent with my students from the academy, and it's just that Teachable has raised their rates quite tripled. So the cost of sort of hosting the course is actually quite a lot. So I'm moving more to like a subscription-based kind of platform for doing these regular sessions. But I do release sessions every 2 weeks. They're very similar to what we've just done. So I do that pretty regularly, and yeah, so I'll have more information coming out about that soon too. But
and it's worth mentioning as well that for anybody who's thinking about the course, on our YouTube channel, you'll find an interview with somebody who's actually one of Mike's students. So we got the student perspective a little bit on the course as well. So that might be with Gil. Is Gil still with you? Is Gil still?
Yeah. Gil's still pretty active. So yeah, it's recently I went with another student from the course, Cole, who's been a very active member. He wanted to do his first recording session, and he knocked it out of the park. So Cole had me come out and produce. We went to Macedonia, we recorded together there. So did a session with some strings, and it was a big success. So
very cool.
He wanted to do that for a birthday present to himself, and he put the time and energy in and got a great result. So
brilliant.
we had a great time in Macedonia.
Superb. Alrighty. One quick question. Mike, would your course be working in Logic as well as Cubase? I mean, it's DAW independent, right?
Yeah, so most of the examples I show with Cubase, but I specifically designed it and tried to kind of speak in ways where sometimes I might mention like, oh, it's called this in Cubase, but in Logic it's called that. It's really about the concepts. So it's less about like, you know, Command C does this. it's really about the concept. So it doesn't really matter what DAW you're working in. I tried to kind of keep it away from that just because I know people work in either. Some people work in Ableton, some people work in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
God, but it's, you know, so I know Logic. I used it for about 10 years before I switched to Cubase. At the college, I teach in both. Half my students work in Logic, half my students work in Cubase. So, so it's also worth mentioning too. I also do one-to-ones. So those are also available through the Teachable site. I do some private lessons as well. So.
Cool. Alrighty, I think we'll wrap it up, yeah? Before any more questions come.
Oh, well, I love it. Thank you guys so much for contributing. Thank you for sharing your work, you know, and congratulations for sharing your work. It's a big thing to put yourself out there, and, you know, for apologies if we didn't get to your work as well, you know, but I hope to catch it. I hope we can do more of these. Always great to collaborate with Brian on these. And if you do sign up for the course, go do it through his link because it supports the QTube as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Everyone wins then. So yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much, Mike. It's been really enjoyable as always. You're out in the States right now. Are you heading back to the UK quite soon? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be back in about a month or so. But
all right.
So
cool.
On the internet, all the same.
All right. Well, take care and safe journey when you do travel back. And yeah, stay in touch. Thanks, everyone.